Is it fair to say that China is the Apple of countries? Like, people often criticize Apple for not actually innovating new things very often. They usually just take innovations that other people have done and put their own shine on them. Now, if you're an Apple fanboy, you might say that they take other people's ideas and then perfect them, or at the very least find ways to make a whole lot of money off of them. Well, China's industry kind of does the same thing. They take innovations that other people have done and then sort of hyper-produce them. Like every tech company in the US has a Chinese knockoff of it. But the thing about building on other people's innovations is that you kind of start on third base. You know, you don't have all the mistakes and the setbacks that the other people have. You get to just make it better. TikTok might be a perfect example of that. You can also say that about their space program, which I really haven't talked much about on this channel, but we're going to talk about it today. And there's a lot to talk about. Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're doing another lightning round video. Lightning round videos are where I take questions from Patreon members and channel members who support at the solar system level. If you would like to ask your own question, just go to patreon.com or the channel member thing down below. You can go check it out. You can ask a question or just join a really awesome community. But enough of that for now, let's get to the first question. Brian Beswick asked, with NASA's budget being gutted and China's space program becoming more competitive with Western programs, do you think China will lead the space race and beat the West in a manned Mars mission? It's definitely possible. Space has always been a flex for any country that wants to be a superpower, and right now China is going out of their way. They are obsessed with becoming the world's next big superpower. Some might argue that they're already there. I mean, this is a country that built a car that jumps over potholes. Which might not even be necessary now that they've built 27,000 miles of high-speed rail, 20,000 of which were built since 2011. The United States, meanwhile, has 375 miles of high-speed rail. We're catching up! But this isn't about high-speed rail, this is about the space race. So where does China stand there? Well, they're the only country that has their own space station. So there's that. So yeah, China's kind of been doing their own thing space-wise, but while, you know, the US, Russia, ESA, JAXA, and all the other people are kind of sharing the International Space Station, China just went and built their own. Those Chinese, they always gotta do their own thing, right? Oh, what, that's our fault? Oh. Yeah, in 2011, an amendment was added to the NASA appropriations bill called the Wolf Amendment that basically forbade NASA from participating, cooperating with, or sharing resources with the Chinese in any way. Because communism. And it's been inserted into every appropriations bill ever since. Yeah, it's called the Wolf Amendment because it's named after the US representative that first put it in there. His name was Frank Wolf, and they tagged that amendment with this. This effectively kicked China out of any international space programs. Now, whether or not you agree with this policy, it kind of forced China to just do their own thing. So they did. Now, the Chinese had already been launching their own astronauts into space. They call them taikonauts, actually. They launched their first one up in 2003. This is called the Shenzhou 5 mission. The Shenzhou spacecraft is kind of their version of the Russian Soyuz capsule, but it's a little bit bigger and more modernized. Shenzhou, by the way, means the divine vessel. All their spaceships have these cool mystical names. So between 2003 and 2011, they kept launching the Shenzhou missions, you know, kind of testing things out, experimenting, performing, you know, rendezvous, perfecting all that kind of stuff, probably with the intention of eventually launching missions to the ISS. But then the Wolf Amendment happened, and they didn't have a station to fly to, so they just built their own. They named it Tiangong, which means Heavenly Palace. It's about a third the size of the ISS. The first module went into orbit in 2021 with 2 more the following year, and the name of the modules are Tianhe, which means Harmony of the Heavens, Wentian, which means Quest for the Heavens, and Mengtian, which means Dreaming of the Heavens. It's been pretty much permanently manned since 2022. The last mission that went up there was in April, and that was Shenzhou 20, by the way. And what they've been doing on their space station is basically what we've been doing on the ISS, you know, learning how to live and work in space for long durations. Which brings us to their Moon and Mars plans. Starting in 2007, they launched the first of the Chang'e program to explore and study the moon. Chang'e is the goddess of the moon in Chinese mythology. Now, this program, by any conceivable measure, has been a wild success. I mean, like, just look at this chart on Wikipedia where green is the successful missions. It's just green all the way down. Literally not one mission has failed, which is saying a lot because there's been a string of failures from other countries and private companies over the last few years. So just to break it down, Chang'e 1 and 2 were orbital test vehicles. Those went up in 2007 and 2010. Chang'e 3 landed and had a small rover in 2013. Chang'e 4 landed on the far side in 2019 and it had a small rover. Chang'e 5 landed on the near side in 2020 and did a sample return to Earth. And Chang'e 6 collected and returned rock samples from the far side of the moon, which has never been done before. That landed in 2024. They've got a couple of upcoming missions. Chang'e 7 is landing at a crater on the South Pole where the first crewed bases would likely develop. This goes up in 2026. And Chang'e 8 also is going to land at the South Pole, but this one's going to test technologies that would actually help build a moon base, meaning like a 3D printer that turns regolith into concrete. This is scheduled for 2028. The fact that they're testing moon base building technology kind of gives you a clue as to what their ultimate moon aspirations are, which is to, of course, have taikonauts planting a Chinese flag on the moon. Right now, that's scheduled for 2029. Yeah, 2029 is a pretty big year for China. That marks their 80th anniversary of their revolution, so they're pretty motivated to stick to that timeline. So, what do their moon plans look like? Well, guess what? It looks a lot like Apollo. They took what's already there, made it their own. It's a 3-person crew with an orbiter and a lander. 2 people go down to the surface, 1 person stays up in orbit. There's an ascent stage that lifts off and rendezvous back with the orbiter before they return back to Earth. Probably the biggest difference between the Apollo program and what they're planning to do is that instead of launching everything on one massive, like Saturn V style rocket, they're going to launch both the modules separately, the orbiter and the lander, and then they'll rendezvous in Earth orbit and then go off to the moon. The orbiter they designed is called the Mingzhao, which means dream vessel. And the lander is called Len Yu, which means embracing the moon. And the rocket they plan to do this with is called the Long March 10, which is still in development, and which looks and operates just like a Falcon Heavy, with 2 side boosters and a reusable core. So 2029, they land on the moon, they plant their flag, brag about it, do that whole thing. But it looks like, according to my research anyway, that that's all they have planned, just kind of one landing to show that they can do it. And after that, they're going back to the robots. Remember when I said that Chang'e 8 is planning on testing out some 3D printing, moon base building technologies? Yeah, they're going to be doing a lot of that. Yeah, their next phase is literally just building a moon base with robots. So they call it the ILRS, which stands for International Lunar Research Station. They're going to be using international partners to help kind of build it and operate it. And it's going to be launched over 5 launches between 2031 and 2035. To do this will require a massive rocket capable of putting a whole bunch of stuff all the way up to the moon. So in order to do that, they're building a new rocket, the Long March 9. Yeah, the Long March 9 is bigger than the Long March 10, because reasons. The Long March 9's been in development for a really long time now. It's been through a lot of iterations, but the most recent one that they showed at the end of last year, it's a Starship.
What?
Except it's a ½ meter wider, so it's actually bigger than the Starship. Right now, it's changed design a million different times, so it could be very different by the time it goes up. But anyway, after they land, probably in 2029, they're going to be spending the next better part of a decade basically just building a moon base with robots to eventually send taikonauts up there to live and work and research, probably sometime in the mid-2030s to late 2030s. Now, if the Artemis missions go to plan, we will have already landed on the moon multiple times and maybe even started putting together a moon base of some sort by the time they're doing this. But, as you mentioned in your question, that's looking less likely. Right now, NASA's still targeting 2027 as a landing date for Artemis 3, which I think it's already been built and paid for, so that's likely to happen, but there's nothing at this point with the last budget cuts, there's nothing scheduled after Artemis 3. And even 2027 is looking less and less likely. It's being pushed back. Now, there is one thing that might change that. There is one thing that might boost NASA's budget. There is one thing that might accelerate NASA's moon base program, and that would be if China landed on the moon. Americans might not care that much about space, but they care a lot about being number one. I gotta be honest, I think it'd actually be really great to see another space race, 1960s style space race again. Now, I just talked a lot about the Chinese space program and their moon ambitions. What I have not talked about yet is your actual question, which is what are their Mars plans? Could they beat us to Mars? That gets a bit more ambiguous. I did find an article from 2021 that said they have a plan to send crew to Mars by 2033. I'm highly skeptical of that date. Like most of their timelines for the moon and whatnot, I could see it happen. I feel like those are pretty accurate. But Mars by 2033, yeah, that feels a little too ambitious to me. But NASA's also expressed an interest in sending astronauts to Mars by the early 2030s, and I'm super skeptical of that as well. And then, of course, there's SpaceX's plan to send people to Mars by 2028 and use the next window in 2026 to send 5 uncrewed starships to Mars. That's 7 months from now. Yeah, I'm sure the astronauts will be driven to the pad in the new Roadster. But China has had some success on Mars with their Tianwen-1 mission in May of 2021. That landed and explored the surface with a rover. They are planning a sample return mission from Mars in 2028 with Tianwen-3. They've also set up a couple of simulated Mars bases in the Gobi Desert to sort of test out some of the technologies that would be required to live on Mars. It's kind of turned into more of a tourist attraction, but it does have a research component to it. So, yeah, I'm skeptical of everybody's timeline when it comes to Mars at this point, but if there's one conclusion that I can make after looking into all this, it's this. Regardless of how you feel about the Chinese and the Chinese space program, they are definitely on a roll lately, and they've been criminally underreported on, including and especially by me. If their moon plans came to fruition, it would be a game changer, not just for China, but for the world in general. Like I said before, nothing would increase NASA's funding more than seeing the image of a Chinese flag planted on the moon. I think we might see some more Artemis missions being funded. We might even want to just leapfrog them entirely and do as Buzz Aldrin said, get our ass to Mars.
Get your ass to Mars.
Now, we are on the verge of a whole new space race, one between an established leader that doesn't want to be outdone and a rising superpower that will do anything it takes to show their dominance, both globally and beyond. It's going to get real interesting, is all I've got to say. On a similar note, next question is from JD Creeper, who asks, what would a Mars colony's politics look like? Would Earth governments try to control them? How can Earth leverage them to follow orders? And would they be controlled by countries or companies? JD, this is not the first question you've had about the politics of space outposts. You seem to think about this quite a bit, so you may have a future in interplanetary diplomacy, my friend. I'm not sure where you go to school for that, but... So based off of my answer to the last question, I'm clearly of the mindset that Mars colonies are pretty far out there. It's still science fiction at this point. Now, whether it's a country or a company that first lands on Mars, the first actual colonies on Mars, I predict will be corporate run and not run by countries. So yeah, whenever I play Jostradamus and try to predict the future, I always try to factor in economics in those predictions because those are the factors that usually drive things. Not to say that we don't have a strong spirit of exploration as a species, of course we do, but that exploration has to be paid for by something. And I think that like strong nationalist fervor only gets you so far because once you've landed there, it kind of just becomes a giant money sink and people just lose interest after a while. And that something is usually resources or new land or just getting in on the ground floor of a new country and establishing yourself as a leader in a new space. And I'm not the first person to say this, but I think that colonizing Mars is going to be a lot more akin to the first colonies that were established in the New World, as opposed to like how we got to the moon. Like the first settlers that landed in Jamestown and Plymouth, like when they say goodbye to their families, they said goodbye forever. Like they were setting up an entirely new life. In fact, Jamestown and Plymouth are actually really good examples because those first explorations that the Europeans did in the Americas, those were funded by kings and nobles and stuff. But those first colonies, those were funded by companies. Jamestown being founded by the Virginia Company and Plymouth being founded by the Plymouth Company. You know, these were business enterprises. They were there to, make use of this new land and plant crops and make money for their companies back home. Which, by the way, the first cash crop that they were able to make self-sustaining was tobacco in Virginia. And yeah, the people that came over, they were working for a company. Like even the Pilgrims that famously were, escaping religious persecution in England, they kind of hitched a ride with this company expedition that was going on. Yeah, these were entire families that were working for this company, and the colony had to grow. And when they first got there, they had a couple of really bad years, drought and whatnot. They call them the starving years, and a lot of people died, and the population went down. So they actually, at one point, shipped over a whole boat full of women just to marry into this colony and bear more children for the company. It's kind of bonkers to think about now. Anyway, the point is, the first settlers on Mars would absolutely, I think, be working for a company. And by that, I do mean like an established self-sustaining colony kind of situation. So the Mars governmental hierarchy, I think, would be controlled by a company in the early days anyway. Now, eventually, they might form their own system of government, maybe even incorporate themselves as their own city or state. One might look at what's happening at Starbase right now. They recently voted to actually incorporate as their own town. It's a company town that before it was just, a bunch of people working there. So in the early days, the Mars colony would probably be easy to control from Earth because they would be reliant on our communication and on our cargo and stuff like that to survive. After it becomes more self-sustainable, yeah, they would probably want to self-govern and split themselves off from the company or the country, whatever that's controlling them at that point. And I don't see that becoming like a big crisis or a war or anything. I don't see like an interplanetary war breaking out over this. I think it'd probably be a pretty easy split. Of course, the big question would be what economically would be supporting this Mars colony? Like what resources would they actually be extracting? Like what would they actually be doing there? And what resources and services would they be providing that would make enough money to make the expense worth it? That's a big question I'll leave for another time. But a lot of people have thought very deeply about this. There are actually a couple of scientific papers that I saw that were published on this. There's no shortage of opinions, but I'll put the link to those papers down below. Donna Sawyer asked, morbidity warning. Are there more South Korean actors and musicians that self-extinguish, or does the news coverage just seem to report it more for that region? Well, if there's anything I'm known for, Donna, it's my expertise in K-pop, so you came to the right guy. That's not true. I thought that BTS stood for behind the scenes. But I did look up a few articles about this, and just to kind of give my own AI summary, so to speak, I'd say you're not wrong about this, Donna. First of all, South Korea in general has a higher extinction rate than the rest of the world at like 28.3 per 100,000 people. That's actually twice the global average. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I have to talk around the S word to not get demonetized. I don't like it any more than you do. So I know I'm speaking in generalities here, maybe even stereotypes, so pardon me, but based off of what I read, South Korea still has a bit of a cultural taboo against talking about mental health. So according to this article, while 4 in 10 people have mental issues in South Korea right now, only 1 out of 10 actually seek help for it. It's a very competitive culture. Young people especially are dealing with a high level of unemployment, and this has led to self-extinguishing being the #1 cause of death for people ages 10 to 39. So it's a problem nationwide to start with. But on top of that, like K-pop idols face a level of scrutiny and pressure that is kind of impossible to imagine. Like they are expected to be perfect, not better than everybody else, perfect. There's also been stories of abuse and corruption in that community where K-pop idols get like locked into contracts where they kind of have their whole lives taken over by their management and their companies. Like they just have no autonomy whatsoever. I mean, celebrity comes with a lot of pressure everywhere in the world, but there it is a whole other level. So yeah, I'll put the links to those articles down below. But yeah, Donna, I don't think you're wrong. I think this is an actual problem. You're not imagining it, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a bad situation. All right, next question. Deanna asked, what's a topic you'd love to explore, but there's either not enough information or it doesn't fit the overall theme of this channel? Well, K-pop, obviously. Now, probably the best answer I can give for this, there's a topic that I've been sort of obsessed with lately. It's a bit of a rabbit hole that I've been going down quite a bit. It actually doesn't not fit the channel. It's just something that I'm still getting my thoughts around it, and I'm not quite sure how to approach it. Eventually, I will probably make a video about it. I'll probably make several videos about it. I've been kind of obsessed lately with the idea that nothing is real on the internet anymore. It's kind of dead internet theory adjacent. Like, I've gotten to the point now, especially on social media, where I just don't believe anything that I see that's not posted by somebody that I explicitly know and trust. Like, if you're familiar with the term kayfabe, it's a wrestling term where, I guess the best way I can explain it is like, if Tom Cruise is in a movie, he plays a character, right? But when he goes on The Tonight Show or whatever, he's Tom Cruise, he's still Tom Cruise in real life. Whereas with wrestling, Hulk Hogan is still Hulk Hogan when he goes on The Tonight Show. Like in wrestling, they live their characters. That's what kayfabe means. And I've kind of become obsessed with this idea that everything is wrestling. Everything is kayfabe. Nothing is real. Everybody's just manipulating an algorithm to get clicks and views and money. And it's kind of ruined the entire concept of authenticity and truth on the internet. And those are just the people that are actual real people or companies. There's also reports that say anywhere from 40 to 60% of all activity on the internet is just done by bots. So yeah, dead internet theory. It slides right up to that. There's also the problem of AI eroding the whole concept of truth, which is something I've talked about a long time ago, and now we're starting to really see it happen. Specifically, a thing that I think is a real problem is Google using AI summaries at the top of their search results, which I am as guilty as anybody of using. It's super helpful for me as a consumer or somebody that's looking stuff up on Google, but they call it like the no-click internet, where you don't actually go to the websites that's putting out the content that that you're getting this information from. Which at some point you have to ask, like, why would you even put content out anymore when there's no traffic to your site where you can sell your products or get your AdSense revenue or whatever. It's the internet eating itself, so to speak. And like I said, I have a lot of thoughts that are kind of swirling around, and it's not really coherent yet. And I know a lot of this sounds like, old man yells at cloud, but I really do feel like the internet is entering an entirely new phase that is frankly dangerous. So, no, I will definitely talk about this at some point on the channel, in probably a really big way. But I just don't have my thoughts around it just yet. So maybe that falls into the not enough information category, that I'm still working it all out. All right, next question comes from Rafe Zero Humor Singer, who asked, the ancient Egyptians were able to forge meteoric iron into daggers without being able to smelt it. This later changed sometime during the New Kingdom. Did they realize the metal they smelted was the same as that which fell from the sky? Okay, so dude, this is actually super interesting. I found an article from the Smithsonian about this. So officially, the scientific community did not make the connection between meteorites on the ground and the phenomena of meteors streaking through the sky. They didn't make that connection until 1803. There was a meteor shower in L'Aigle in France, and there was a physicist named Jean-Baptiste Biot who reported on it, and he included in his report sightings that people had of stones falling from the sky after this meteor shower. This idea had been flirted with for a while. There was a book that came out in the late 1700s that talked about it, but it wasn't really, confirmed amongst the establishment until 1803. But yes, the Egyptians did use meteorite iron to make daggers. They specifically found a dagger in King Tut's tomb. It's not known if they made them just ceremonially, though, because he was, the king. So just to back that up, iron smelting became a thing in Anatolia with the Hittites around, they say, 3,300 years ago. But that was about 1300 BCE. But it was like 700 years later before that got to Egypt. So yeah, there were meteorite iron things that were being made pre-smelting in Egypt. And by the way, we know that this iron is different, that it wasn't smelted iron because it contains things like nickel and cobalt in high quantities that would have been, melted out in the smelting process. There are also little crystals in it that would only have formed, in space. But the question was, did they know this came from the sky? And actually, kind of. So according to this article, which I'm linking down below, is from Victoria Almanza Villatorio. She's an Egyptologist, probably saying her name wrong. But there were a series of funeral liturgies that were found inside of pyramids between 4,100 and 4,400 years ago that described the sky as being an iron bowl that holds water. And when that water sloshes out, that's what causes the rain. But according to these etchings, sometimes pieces of iron would break off of this bowl and fall to the ground, and that was the meteorites that they found. Now, to be clear, this does not mean that they made the connection between the meteorites on the ground and the, things streaking across the sky. That's not quite what it's saying. It's actually quite a bit bathed in symbolism and metaphor. Like the Egyptian symbols for iron was actually the same as the symbols for sky and womb. And they think that maybe is an homage to Nut, who was the Egyptian goddess of the sky. So kind of the words iron and sky were synonymous, in a way. Wasn't there a movie called Iron Sky? So probably not. They probably did not know that it was the same thing as the meteors they saw in the sky, but they did know that the meteorite iron that they found on the ground came from the sky, or at least they believed that. Again, it was more based on mythology and symbolism and metaphor and all that. But they did know that it was special, which is why, they made daggers for pharaohs out of it. which is really interesting. I had never considered that before, so cool. Yeah, thanks for that question. All right, we got one more question to get to, but before we do that, we need to bless the new Patreon and channel members with the power of Zoe. Here we go. First up, we have from Patreon, Antonio Thomas, Dustin Werner, and Graham Wynn. And for members, we have Aesthetic Blossoms, Amy O'Brien, C. Dorman 11, Stacy Keith, Winsome, Danita J, Ketchring, Hadabi, Jack Meenan, Jim, Matthew Shipsky, Ratsy Daisy, Eliza Pekele, Daniel Brias, Vicky Minaj, Rich Critchley, Jen Ellen, Carter Beal, Torinto, Candy Weeb, Leo, and Zachbot. Thank you guys so much for signing up. If you'd like to join them, get early access to videos, get access to an exclusive Discord channel where there's a lot of really cool people in there, and just be an awesome part of an awesome community, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe, link down below, or just hit that join button underneath the thing. There you go. All right, last question goes to the new guy, Kevin Hoffer, who asked, concrete is 8% of the world's carbon emissions. I know you've looked into Carbon Cure. What do you think of alternative cements like Prometheus or Brimstone? Or will SCM replacement dominate low-carbon cement? Okay, this really should be an entire video. It's a lot, so I'm going to have to like really compress this down a little bit. If this is something you guys want to see a whole video on, please shout it out in the comments. We could probably make that happen. But yeah, as Kevin points out, concrete production is very high CO2 releasing, and with all the construction that's going on in the world and the growth in the developing countries and whatnot, this is going to become more and more of a problem. So in case you're wondering why concrete creates so much CO2, basically concrete is made up of two things, cement and aggregates. And there's fine aggregates like sand, and then there's more coarse aggregates like gravel and stone. And the cement kind of binds all of that together. So traditional concrete uses what's known as Portland cement. Not sure exactly how I got that name, but Portland cement is basically made by heating up limestone. And this creates CO2 in two different ways. One, it has to be heated up to 1400 degrees Celsius, which means a lot of fuel is needed for that. But also, when the limestone breaks down, it produces CO2. It basically breaks down into calcium oxide, or lime, and CO2. So these alternative cements that he's talking about, and that I've talked about before, they're basically trying to replace that limestone element of it to make it carbon neutral or possibly carbon negative, because it would actually bring in CO2 into the process and sequester that CO2 into the concrete. So Prometheus does this by using algae to create sort of a biocement. And the algae, of course, pulls CO2 from the atmosphere, and then when it, is hardened into the cement, they say it's kind of the same as like coral formation. It sort of mimics that process. Prometheus claims that it's just as strong, if not stronger, than regular cement, and that it actually increases the amount of sound absorption. Brimstone's process replaces the limestone with calcium silicate rocks, which can be found in basaltic rocks all around the world, so there's a large supply of it, and it's kind of all over the place. And they claim that it's carbon negative because magnesium in the process can bind with CO2 during the production. And Kevin mentions SCMs. That stands for supplementary cementitious materials. I had to look at it. Those can be things like fly ash, rice husk ash, or slag. Slag is a byproduct of metal refining. SCMs are already pretty widely used, but there are some supply constraints. There's just not as much of those byproducts being produced to keep up with the amount of concrete being produced right now. So all of these are still a little bit nascent in their development. They haven't been scaled up to the point yet where they can be economically competitive with regular cement. I'm always going back to that point. And by the way, the answer to this might be all of the above. Why not do all the things? But the one I might put my money into might be the brimstone process, where they use the calcium silicate, because calcium silicate is very widely available. It kind of fits into our infrastructure that's already in place. The algae thing is cool, especially for the carbon sequestration, but there's a huge infrastructure that needs to be built around that. Whereas brimstone solution just means you need to scale up the mining of those particular kinds of rocks. Now, there is a whole rabbit hole of what is the environmental impact of all that mining. That's for another time. But yeah, Brimstone's actually gotten some federal funding in the last few years to develop this process. That's also been rated to meet ASCM C150 standards, which means that it's got a safety protocol that's in place that matches what's already out there. And like I said, it fits into the already existing infrastructure pretty nicely. So that's the one that I would place my bets on, if there were one that was going to win out, so to speak. But that's a quick answer at the end of a very long video. I can't go too far into it without this video getting super long. But again, if you guys want to see a full-length video on it, I do think it's a very important topic and it's very interesting. Who knows, maybe I could even interview somebody at one of these companies. Just, shout it out in the comments. Let me know. And we are going to need a lot of concrete if we're going to ever catch up to China's high-speed rail system. Any day now. Yeah, 27,000 miles. By the way, that is enough to encircle the entire globe. That's how much high-speed rail service that China has put in just in the last 15 years or so. So around the world trip on high-speed rail. That sounds like a challenge for Downey Live. Downey Live has a bunch of videos where he rides and reviews railways. He does do a lot of like train travel challenges. And he recently did one where he traveled from the Arctic Circle to Africa using only trains. And you can see it right now on Nebula. Nebula, of course, is a streaming service that I'm a part of, as well as many of your favorite thought-provoking creators. It's where we can post our videos early and ad-free, so you don't have to sit through a sponsor read like this one. And often uncensored, so I could talk about self-extinguishing without having to say self-extinguishing. Yeah, you might have noticed I have to mitigate my speech when I'm doing my YouTube videos in order to not offend the digital superorganism that is the algorithm, but we don't have to worry about that on Nebula. There, I'm free to be exactly who I really am. And don't you want more of that? It's also where you can find a bevy of Nebula original series like War Room from Real Life Lore, where you can stay up to date on all the global conflicts around the world, some of which you may not even know about. Or you can check out 17 Pages from Kevin McKay of Bobby Broccoli, who, if you're not following Bobby Broccoli, you're missing out. You should check it out. But 17 Pages focuses on a very high-profile scandal that rocked the scientific community in the 1980s. And there's plenty more. I'm actually working on a couple of really big projects that you'll be able to find there, and yeah, I can't wait to share them with you. Nebula is awesome. It helps support my work, and you get a crazy amount of content out of it. Like, I like to say that it's like somebody just curated your favorite creators and then gave you even more on top of that. To get started, just type in go.nebula.tv/Joe Scott, and you can get 40% off the annual subscription, which brings the cost just down to $3 a month. It's a crazy deal. It also makes a great gift if you've got a college-bound graduate in the family, just saying. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that they have a lifetime, yes, lifetime subscription for $300 if you've got some money burning a hole in your pocket and you hate recurring payments. And remember, the longer you stay alive, the more value you get out of it. Anyway, you can click the link down below or just scan the handy QR code on screen to get started. I think you'll like it. Nebula's awesome. Go check it out. All right, thanks for the questions, for those guys who asked the questions. And yeah, again, shout out in the comments if you want to see any of these as a full-length video. Please do like and share this if you liked it. Maybe check out any of the other videos that might be popping up on your screen afterwards. I have like almost 1,000 that I've made at this point, but you can go watch them if you're not familiar with the channel. You can get a better idea of what I do. If you like them, I do invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos regularly. But that's it for now. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week. Have an eye-opening summer. Summer is starting off. And I'll see you guys next time. Love you guys. Take care.